By the time a student sits down in their science class, there's a good chance they may have already been taught by their feed, by an influencer, or even by an AI-generated video from a nameless content creator that had science in the handle. Students are getting more information than ever from sources that were never designed to get it right in the first place, and from people who sound like they know exactly what they're talking about, even if there's a bit more nuance to it than they think. Today I'm talking with Jack Brewster, founder of Newsreel and a former journalist, about algorithms, viral content, and what exactly shows up in students' feeds. We're recording this just ahead of the Reimagining Science Education Summit, hosted by Macmillan Learning, Springer Nature, Digital Science, and Holtzbrink. I'm Marissa Bluestone, and this is the What and Who of EDU. Thank you so much for joining us on the What and Who of EDU, Jack. Let's start simple. How are students encountering science today, and what has changed the most over the past few years?
I think they're seeing it more and more than they ever have before. That's the irony, right? They have access to more information than they ever have. When they leave the classroom, they're getting quote unquote science education everywhere where they go. The problem is that they don't necessarily know what to trust, and it's harder than ever to sort of orient yourself to find out what you can and should not trust. So I think the biggest thing is that it's ubiquitous. It can now be accessed from a robot. It can now be accessed from a person sitting on the couch in their mom's basement. And that can be wonderful in some ways, that you can access information anywhere. But it also means that it opens up a whole web of problems as well. So that's the biggest thing as a journalist, I'll say. Yeah.
Do you think that social media is, or, scrolling through the news is the primary place where students are actually learning their science these days, or is it still very dependent on classroom?
No, I do. I would say, look, it depends on how you define science, right? To me, science as a journalist can mean a lot of different things. And I think many people on social media, commentary to them is science, right? And that's a problem. I think the definitions have blurred now, and the expertise that we once gave to so many distinguished people in science is now under question. And that means that students are experiencing science in new and not so always beneficial ways. So I would definitely say that they're getting more of a science, they're experiencing more science when they go home. The problem is it's dubious science, right? Or sometimes it's not even science really at all, but they think it is, and that's a real problem. And so I think teachers, educators, professors, principals, anybody in the academic space needs to take a real vested interest, not only what happens in the classroom, but what also happens when they go home. And I know I'm rambling on now, but I see these phone bans come through, right? And I'm a journalist. I'm not going to take a hard stance on it. But what I will say is that what I worry about is that all of the sort of things in the classroom become about sort of restricting access to the internet, because restricting access to phones, restricting access to computers, because the research does show that it can interfere with learning. But are we giving people instruction about what happens when they go home? Because I think teachers need to take a vested interest in that more than they already are.
So if students are seeing more science than ever, but not always the right kind, what's making it harder for them to know what to trust and what not to trust?
Coming out of COVID, and I've done some reporting on this, there was a huge push by health influencers to step into the science world and take a more vested interest in it and comment on it more. And that spawned like this huge, I think, push behind like some really dubious claims surrounding science. And that's the biggest thing I think I've seen recently, is like a lot of false narratives coming out about what particular supplements can do to you, about vaccines, about particular flu variants and things like that. That has been really like driven by the manosphere, and that's a whole other thing. But the biggest thing that I've seen recently, yeah.
So you're the founder of Newsreel.
hmm
You were a former journalist. Can you tell me a little bit more about the role that algorithms are playing in what students are seeing and learning?
Yes. So, I mean, algorithms, I think it's good to define first, like what they are, right? And like the way that they've changed. And I think the biggest misconception first is that an algorithm is just a set of numbers, right? That is surfacing keywords. That's not happening anymore. It's very much driven by artificial intelligence. These social media platforms invest in billions of dollars into them. And they're very, very good at doing one thing, and that is understanding who you are based on billions of data points, now driven by artificial intelligence. And now they're reading content as well on the supply side and saying, okay, what is this person? Who is this person? What are they saying? What are they writing about? What are they producing video about? And they just match them up to who they think will drive the most eyeballs. And so I think it's good first to understand like what the algorithms are and how they work. And like there's this really big misconception right now that it's just like still functioning on keywords. They are vastly more powerful now and sophisticated. And that is a world that we were not in 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, when social media was just mainly like, oh, I follow you, you follow me, now I see your content. So that brings me to my second point. I think the most profound way that these influence how we think about the world, how we think about science, is that now what seems trustworthy is what's viral. There are so many times when I see now people claiming that the New York Times and mainstream media are not covering something, that they are not reporting on something, and 99 times out of 100 they've reported on it. They just didn't show up in their feed because it's not going viral. What's gone viral is what is most outlandish, what's most negative, commentary, rage bait, AI slop, things that really are engineered for the feed. And there is a huge amount of science now behind this, right? Like quote unquote science, but science behind this that you can hack the algorithm in certain ways. It's like almost having an editor that you have the inside track on, right? That like I think of these companies sometimes as newspapers, like ad-based newspapers, and the algorithms are just editors. And so when you want something to go viral, you can hack it in a certain way by making it seem more outlandish, seem crazier, seem just truly like eye-catching, and that'll drive clicks and drive views. So if I join on TikTok now, I don't have to have any authority whatsoever. I can go viral the second that I join the platform because of the way that these social media companies have changed.
Okay, so we hear a lot about things going viral, like bots with influencers and content just keeping on getting pushed into feeds. How much of what students are seeing is actually being amplified and not really earned?
Absolutely. I mean, there's inauthentic activity everywhere. And I just reported on this. There's now like what I call the rise of like big slop, I guess you could say. Like I call it like SaaS, slop as a service. So these huge companies now pouring money into just pumping out content at scale. And that's the other side to this, right? So there's inauthentic activity on the user side, right, on a lot of these platforms. And then there's quasi inauthentic activity on the supply side as well. These companies that are, or these users that are just growing these content farms overnight because of agentic tools. And it means that social media is now not social anymore and is really based around just like how much ad traffic they can generate. So I think we should stop calling them social media companies. I'm a journalist, and I don't think that that's an objective way to phrase what these companies are doing. I think they're ad companies, is what they are, and attention economy would say so as well.
Yeah, and if for those of you who are not subscribed to Jack's Substack, you definitely want to. His article on Big Slop and service as a slop was pretty interesting. You talked a bit about going viral,
Yeah.
and how would you make something go viral, and what's the impact of that going viral have on the actual content?
Well, stepping back, the problem that and when it comes to science education is the same problem that posed with journalists. We are journalists write for editors, not algorithms, and that's
Mm,
become a huge problem because the all of our content is now filtered by algorithms, and we are no longer the gatekeepers. Same thing is happening to science. Scientists do not write for algorithms; they write for this. Or they conduct their work for the scientific method, and that is antithetical to the feed. What is nuanced, what has layers to it, does not work on TikTok and Instagram. I always say, like, I don't think it's a death of truth. I think it's a death of nuance because that is the way that we've structured an information landscape. Misinformation has been around forever. What's changed now is that we've accelerated the sort of the approach to how we view information so that we've stripped away all kinds of nuance, right? Well, like a newspaper, just inherently in the form that it has, you can layer on nuance because there's more space to do it. But we've entirely changed that with the social media filter feed based system that we now operate in. To get to your question about how you go viral, studies show that there are certain ways that you can prey on, I should say, behavior psychology to drive your content to gain more eyeballs. And that's why you see even like bigger companies now, like uh, sort of leaning into chaotic forms of marketing, right? That's not the Gen Z intern, as some people commonly say, taking over the account. They have poured a lot of money and effort into making their content seem more authentic for the feed. And that means you have to sort of play by TikTok and Instagram's rules. You're not
mm,
playing by traditional media's rules anymore, right? To get earned media. So that is a profound shift. Like, I mean, even something that your company, I'm sure, like thinking about your marketing strategy, right? Like, you guys deal with education. Education is not always the first sexiest thing to go viral on social media. And that's a problem for our society right now, that like
yeah.
what we prioritize is not what necessarily helps us, right? It's what is most attention grabbing, and that's a very scary world to be living in. So yeah, to go viral, you can hack your way to the top. Absolutely. If I wanted to, with my news company now, get a lot more money, get a lot more traction, I could very easily do so by being more conspiratorial, by being more divisive, by being leaning into different hooks, right? Like different strategies to attract eyeballs right away on TikTok. These are all listed online. You can go look at them. There's a reason why every single video seems the same. It's because they're all following a recipe. It's just a playbook. That's all it is.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. And it actually makes me think about, as a teacher, as an instructor, is it necessarily their job to try and make content, go viral so students will pay attention to it? It seems like the attention span of students has changed, or is that a misconception?
I think, well, there's mixed research on this now, to getting into the nuance, right? About like
Yeah.
whether quite literally our attention spans have shortened. I would guess that it's somewhere in between the doomsayers and the optimists. Like I always kind of feel that way though as a journalist. What I will say about this is like I do think it's changed the way the stress that's been put on our attention spans, right? So like a student going home now is bombarded by distractions. A teacher preparing for a student for a lesson plan themselves is bombarded by distractions. And that may not be quote unquote shortening our attention spans on the biological level, but it is having, I think, a profound effect on our ability to deep think and to dream and to critically think. And we haven't even really gotten into AI yet, right? And that is having, I think, an even a more profound effect because it's a combination of all of the sort of attention economy things we're already talking about when it comes to social media, and now adding a robotic layer on top of it that can take over a lot of the critical thinking that we once did for us. So
Yeah, critical thinking, I think, is one of the more important skills in the AI world that we're living in because you're going to need it to make decisions. The AI can't make a decision for you.
no,
It can give you the information you need, but it's still up to you to make a decision and use your skills. So how how do you think we should teach students to question information without making them skeptical of everything?
yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think leaning into healthy curiosity and what is the difference between skepticism and curiosity? I think skepticism is often like nihilism, right? You sort of choose to reject all the information that you're getting entirely, right? So, I mean, a skeptic would say that or conspiracy theorists would say that the White House Correspondents' Dinner was staged, right? We've seen this popping up all over social media over the last week.
Yeah.
And what I would say to someone who thinks that or was promoting a conspiracy theory, I would say, how deep have you really gone on this? Have you read horizontally, as they say, right? Which means reading across several different sources. Have you acted like a journalist? And that's what I often say to people about healthy curiosity. A journalist questions their own beliefs, but they also question the processes that they use to get to that belief, and they choose to actively seek out sources that conflict with their way of thinking. And that would be, I think, the advice that I would give. And the final thing I always say to conspiracy theorists or even people who it's very human to believe in a conspiracy. As I said, misinformation has been around forever. That is not a new phenomenon. The death of truth is not a new phenomenon. When they released the printing press, it spawned conspiracy theories to go viral back in the time when there wasn't even a social media, right? The Salem witch trials was partially by the printing press because crazy theories about witches could spread via pieces of paper, right? So this has been around forever. And so what I say to people when they say, oh, I'm a healthy skeptic, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I would say, one, how curious are you? And two, you're actually quite the optimist. And what I mean by that is that you have a insane belief in humanity because you think that people are going to be that tight-lipped to not say something about a conspiracy theory, or that they're going to be able to, at all levels of the government, keep that kind of secret from the public. And I just don't, that's a lot of layers to go through for something to succeed as a conspiracy theory. So that's what I often say to people who believe these things. Yeah.
Yeah. From what you're telling me, the shift seems a lot bigger than science. We're seeing it play out in government. We're seeing it play out in other conspiracy theories, backwards looking content too.
Yes. Yes.
So all of that said, how are you trying to do things differently with Newsreel? And how have students been engaging with it?
So Newsreel's mission in one sentence is to be a news app and content app for people who have given up on news. And we are accepting, and this goes back to some of the things we talked about, right? Like, how do you accept some of the realities without leaning into them as an educator, right? How do you accept that maybe our attention spans have shortened without playing into them, right? And what I've tried to do with Newsreel, maybe people will say I've succeeded, maybe people will say I have not, and I hope that they are there to judge for themselves, is to try and basically build a platform that looks like a lot of the things that they're already experiencing on their phones, right? It acknowledges that people want to get content that's multimodal. They want to see images, infographics. They want it to be interactive. They want it to feel like what a lot of the apps on their phone already feel like, which is very engaging, not just blank text on a page. But what we've decided to do is make the content all be vetted and high quality, which means that nobody can produce content on our platform that has not been vetted, right? They're all journalists. They're all news outlets that have gone through a vetting process. So right now, a lot of the content is actually even produced by our internal team of journalists. It's just delivered in a format that people I think understand, right? That are very much on their phones for most of the day, which is a lot of the population. It's not for the long form journalism readers, but we do have a lot of people who sometimes are reading long form journalism still and want an alternative sometimes. And I really want Newsreel to be what I think is missing right now in our information landscape, which is a high quality news source that acknowledges the realities of our time. And I often say that we're sort of looking to be the place for the next generation to understand the world and their place in it, which I think is missing right now.
Is there a version of science communication online that students can actually trust? And if so, what would that look like? Newsreel? Would it look like something else?
I think we need more credentials on the internet, and that is the biggest problem that is facing us right now. We don't have a way for scientists and people in the science community to truly showcase their credibility. And that is the biggest problem that I have with the internet right now. And so I've tried to bring that back on Newsreel. I mean, we have like just to show you how low the bar is. So X about 6 months ago changed their I would say moderation, their practices, so that now accounts show the country of origin. So you can now see, if you had an account that you're based in the United States, right? It's exposed hundreds of accounts across the world that were commenting on politics and news from a different country than they were covering or pretending to be from, right? So, Trump lover 3232 was actually based in, Warsaw, right? So it's just exposed so many different accounts. That is like such a low bar, right, for information about the sources where we're getting our news, that it's just not a part of the internet. And I wish that we could bring back some of the sort of products of the blue check on Twitter, right, or on Instagram that now we just completely given away. And I think if we had that, scientists, journalists, experts would be a whole lot better off, and our information landscape would be a whole lot better off.
Yeah. I had spoken not so long ago with one of our psychology authors, Dave Myers, and he mentioned something that really stuck with me, and that's students tend to be a bit more trusting of anecdotes, like their sister's cousin heard something, than they do with the stats and the data. And, he was hopeful that one day we'll get back to looking at the numbers, and the numbers being the thing that helps to guide the story. Do you see a world where either it's possible to go back to looking at data and analyzing and using those critical thinking skills, or finding a way to kind of marry the two, where you have like the anecdotes, but also the data?
I do hope that we go back, I should say, or can improve on our society's critical thinking skills. I have hope that we've sort of reached bottom in terms of our information landscape right now, and that more emphasis will be placed on critical thinking skills, especially in the age of AI, because I think it will be a necessity, right? If you are not a subject matter expert and you do not have something that a machine can offer, it's going to be harder for you to get a job. And I think that's an opportunity for a lot of people to lean into what makes them uniquely human, what makes them uniquely an expert. And so I do think there's a moment right now, and there's a moment too when it comes to what has happened to our social media feeds. I think a lot of people are fed up with how they are designed. I mean, there was a court case, as we know, right, with Meta and Google just a few weeks ago, where they, for the first time, held these social media companies liable for the design of their platforms. So I think there's a real moment that we could be in right now for change. Do I think that everyone's going to start going back to numbers and analyzing things before they speak? Absolutely not. That is not human. I do think there's a way to marry them, though. I think there are great parts of what social media has offered. I do not want to say that social media companies are all bad. I do not want to say that AI is all bad. It's not what I'm saying at all. Some of the tools of our communication. It's phenomenal what our phones have allowed us to do. I believe that AI can enable us to do much more in-depth reporting as journalists. What I do think we need to remember, though, is that unfettered access to these tools and the ability for anyone to be a journalist or anyone to be a quote-unquote expert is not always the best thing. And I think that's something we all can agree on.
Yeah, it's very much not black and white. It's not AI is good or AI is bad. It's depending on how you use it, and the role that it could have in your life. So our podcast is designed for educators. If there's one thing that you would want teachers, instructors, college administrators listening to the podcast to do differently tomorrow, what would that be?
Be curious yourselves, not just in your own field, and encouraging other students. Like, actually live in the tools and tools of communication of our time. Get a TikTok account. If you don't want to get one yourself, then use it on your desktop and use a burner email because you don't want to give data to it, which I totally understand. But use these tools. You don't have to put them on your phone, but use them as research. Be curious about them. Really, like, if the student brings them up and says, I heard this on X and X account, go look up that account. Learn about where your students are getting access to their information. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a classroom and I've asked the teacher to ask his or her students where they get their news, and the teacher is absolutely floored by the accounts that his or her students are bringing up. There was one time I went to a class at Colgate University, and a student said that he got his news from a talking fish on TikTok. And the look on the teacher's face, I just will never, ever, ever forget that. And that doesn't mean that I want to put down that student. What I really hope is that the teacher goes and looks up that account and sees what it's providing. Who is this person? Can you come back the next day to the class and say, hey, that account, I just looked it up on Google. That guy was at the January 6th riot, the guy who's now giving you news as a talking fish, and has funding from Russia. And I'm just making that up. But, I'm sure that there are examples out there of that a basic Google search would give you that kind of information. So I say be curious, use AI tools, try them out, see what students are doing. If students are plagiarizing or using AI to write their essays, go see how they're doing it. How are they using Claude Code? How are they using Claude Cowork? I've dove in head first to these tools, and I want to learn how they're being used, how they're being weaponized, because not only as a journalist am I curious, but just as a human being. So that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to have to look up the talking fish.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Unless it's Hecklefish from the Y-Files, and then I know who that is.
Yes. No, I think it's the one from, it's like a template from the SpongeBob. They used to have like a talking fish. It's just somebody's taken it and used AI to just like have a news broadcast. So, yeah.
Okay, so where do you think the conversation about AI in education is falling short right now?
I would just say that one of the biggest things I think that's missing in science education is a nuanced conversation about how AI is going to impact it and be used. And I still have, I just can't tell you how many times I have gone to a classroom and either it's a full embrace of AI or it's a complete banned use of AI, or the same thing goes for social media. And I just don't think that that's healthy for our students. I think that teachers need to strike a balance and find a way forward. So that's the only thing else that I would say that I would add. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and joining the What and Who of EDU. We loved having you, and we hope to see you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Marissa. I appreciate it.
A special thanks to Jack for taking the time to talk with us today about how students are encountering science and what that looks like in a world shaped by algorithms. What stuck with me today was the reminder that by the time students get to class, they've already been exposed to a ton of content. They're picking up info on their phones and their feeds and from people and from platforms. Some are credible, and some are bots designed to get as many clicks as possible. And that makes things complicated, because it's not always obvious what's real, what's exaggerated a little bit, and what is specifically designed to go viral. And as Jack pointed out, what students end up seeing isn't necessarily the most accurate. It's just what gets pushed up to the top. He said it best when he shared that it was less a crisis of truth than a loss of nuance. And that takes time, so nuance can get lost in the scroll. Part of the job now is helping students to slow down and look at where their content is coming from in the first place. If you try just one thing from this episode, it's this. Next time a student brings up something they saw online, don't just jump straight into correcting it. Ask them where it came from and what else they can find that says something different. That's where learning starts. If something in this episode stuck with you, give us a like, or a comment, or a rating. It helps other educators like you find us. And if you've got a colleague that keeps hearing, "I saw this on TikTok," from their students, this might be worth sending their way. This is the What and Who of EDU, and we'll see you next time.